So you want to bake beautiful artisan sourdough bread, but you don't have a Dutch oven? Well, that's no problem. I'm going to show you exactly how I bake this loaf right here in my home oven with no fancy equipment and teach you how to get the exact same results every time. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The trick is to mimic the environment found inside a Dutch oven inside of your whole oven. Most of us home bakers don't have access to a commercial steam oven, and that's why we use Dutch ovens to bake our sourdough. The reason that they are so good at producing the results that we want is twofold. The heavy lid clamps down and traps a ton of steam within the Dutch oven itself, and the heavy weight of the Dutch oven actually absorbs and radiates heat at a really even pace throughout the baking process. You might be wondering, why is steam so important in the baking of sourdough? Well, there is a little bit of science behind it, and we're gonna get a little nerdy right now. So, steam actually condenses on the surface of the dough. The dough is cooler than the air temperature in the oven, and so the steam condenses on the dough, which reduces the temperature, which prolongs crust formation. So this actually keeps the dough more pliable for longer, and this is really an important part of the sourdough baking process. If the crust forms too quickly, it can impact your oven spring. So during the baking process, the dough undergoes one final bump of fermentation. And during that time, the bubbles in the dough actually expand as the yeast and bacteria die off. And if the crust forms too quickly, it hinders your bread from fully opening and those holes from fully expanding inside the dough. So steam is really important for a strong oven spring. Steam also helps us get that blistered, deliciously golden brown crust that none of us sourdough addicts can get enough of. Through a reaction called the Maillard reaction, the steam that interacts with the surface of the crust in the dough helps to caramelize any of the sugars that are remaining in the dough and give us that gorgeous crust. Now that we've got all the nerdy stuff behind us, the question becomes, how do we create that perfect environment in the oven itself to give us that perfectly blistered, delicious crust and to slow crust formation so we get a nice strong oven spring? Well, I'm going to show you how I do it, and it's so easy. The only pieces of equipment I use to bake my bread without a Dutch oven are these two things here. So the first one is this. This is a 16 by 20 baking steel. And the reason that I use this is threefold, actually. So the first one is it gives me a nice flat, solid place to bake my bread. Secondly, it acts a lot like a heavy Dutch oven in that it is a heat sink. So it helps the oven to recover from temperature swings when we open and close the door. And lastly, it absorbs and radiates heat evenly throughout the baking process. So this is an important piece. If you don't have a baking steel, you can absolutely use a baking stone. And I did have one for a number of years, but I actually prefer the steel now. The other piece of equipment that I'm gonna use is this 8-inch cast iron skillet. So I use my skillet to add humidity and steam to the oven throughout the baking process. Every time we open the oven door, hot, moist air is looking to escape and move somewhere cooler and drier, and then that cool, dry air rushes in to fill the void. By having something in the oven that can not only replace the humidity lost, but add to it throughout the baking process, we are definitely mimicking what a Dutch oven can do. There are two ways to add steam to the oven while you're baking sourdough. Some people prefer only to add hot water once they put the loaf in, but I actually prefer to put water into my skillet throughout the preheating process, and it tends to last as long as I need it to in the baking time as well. I personally find it safer and easier to add water to my skillet when the oven is cold and I'm not worried about burns. The first thing I'm gonna do is open my oven and place a rack in the bottommost position. So for me, that's right there. And then what I'm gonna do is just place my cast iron skillet on that rack. Then I'm gonna add 4 cups of water. In my experience, 4 cups will almost always see you through the preheat and the subsequent baking time. Then I'm gonna carefully push that guy in without hopefully spilling the water or not. Oh my God. It's a lot easier if you face the oven head on. Then I put my next rack above that, and I need to put it high enough that it clears the cast iron pan. So that's where I've got my rack now. And on that rack, I'm going to put my baking stone. You can kind of see that I've offset my baking stone and my cast iron skillet so that the steam can actually rise from here and move over throughout the oven. I find if I put it underneath the baking stone, it doesn't travel as well through the oven. And that's it. I'm going to set my oven to bake. I'm gonna preheat it to 450, and I'm gonna let it heat soak for at least 45 minutes. This is really important to ensure that all the components in the oven have reached the full temp so that when we do open and close the oven, it can recover quite quickly from that. The oven is preheated, and now it's time to get this sourdough baking. So this is a loaf I whipped up yesterday, and it's been cold fermenting in the fridge ever since. I used a slightly too small bag here, and it is definitely expanded beyond the Bannatyne. All right, look at that beauty. The last step before the sourdough goes into the oven is give it a nice deep score. I like to do a little bit of a curved slash, but you can do pretty much whatever you like. Just gonna go over it one more time to make sure it opens up for us all the way. And then I'm gonna use my handy dandy little mini pizza peel. I'm gonna scoop this up and pop it in the oven. Oh my gosh, look at that loaf. Now the hard part. We gotta let it sit for at least an hour before we cut into it. Just gonna leave it here on this wire rack, and we'll come back in a little while. It's been not quite an hour, but I don't think I can wait any longer. I need to cut this open. I need to see what's inside, and I think you do too. I can't decide which way to cut it. Because it's a little bit more oblong, the way I scored it, I think I'm gonna go this way so that if we decide to use it for toast or sandwiches, it's not like a piece of bread this wide, it's a little bit narrower. So I'm gonna go this way, and then that way it's not as hard to cut through the ear either. Let's go right here. I wonder how long it's gonna be before the kids can smell it and start circling. Oh, still steaming. I definitely cut it too early, but I just couldn't wait. Look, isn't that perfect? Okay. You just got to admire it. It's a beautiful loaf of bread. Like, oh my gosh. How could you not just love it? It's just, I don't even know what to say. The best thing is cutting into a loaf of sourdough, I swear. Just makes me so happy. I'm gonna close this up and set it aside so that I don't actually ruin my dinner. I have been known to just eat a bunch of sourdough in the afternoon and then not eat dinner. I'm not above it. I'm not too proud to admit it, but I am gonna set this aside for now. But if you use this guide or you found it helpful, please let me know. You can always drop a comment below even if you use a slightly different method. I'd love to hear how you do it so I can give that a try. If you do bake something and you're super proud of it and you want to share it with me, please do just post it over on Instagram and tag me in it at Crave the Good for my food blog or at Boreal Bloom Homestead for this homesteading blog. You'll get me at either one, and I love to share sourdough. Your sourdough bakes make me so happy.